So I still haven't seen X-Men Days of Future Past, but part of me is really, really hoping that he uses a katana in that movie. I mean, because, he gets a katana in this movie, and I just want him to use a katana. The Wolverine is directed by James Mangold, written by Mark Bomback and Scott Frank, and is based on Volume 1 of the Wolverine comics from Chris Claremont and Frank Miller. And this movie stars, okay, hold on, pronunciation, Hugh Jackman, Tao Okamoto, Rila Fukushima, and Svetlana Kodchenkova. Probably got that wrong. Anyway, in The Wolverine, Logan has taken on pretty much a vow of pacifism. He doesn't want to kill anyone anymore after the events of X-Men The Last Stand. So he's pretty much hiding in a cave like a hermit of sorts when he is called upon by this Japanese soldier he helped out way back in World War II. And this Japanese guy Yashida, he's an industrialist of sorts, and he is dying. And he brings Logan to Japan in the hopes that he can get Logan's healing factor. So while in Japan, Logan ends up having to defend Yashida's granddaughter Mariko, but who's being attacked by the Yakuza, and at the same time he's dealing with the fact that suddenly he has lost his healing factor. So the Wolverine is a sequel to X-Men: The Last Stand, and I like how it acknowledges the existence of that movie because a lot of fans don't wanna they wanna pretend it never happened. But here in the X-Men: The Last Stand, like they really do show that the things that happened in that movie are affecting Logan. Like one of my problems with X-Men: The Last Stand is that never really showed the effects of what happened in that movie to the characters. And here we really do get to see that Logan's actions in that movie really have taken a toll on him. Some people might also consider this like a replacement for X-Men Origins Wolverine, not necessarily a replacement origin story, but a replacement like standalone story. However, I don't think that's right either. I mean, I didn't really like Origins Wolverine either, but here they actually do acknowledge it. Like if you listen carefully, they mention Kayla, who was his love interest in X-Men Origins Wolverine. But anyway, about the Wolverine, I think it's an extremely well-made movie, definitely like on lots of technical fronts. However, I don't really think it feels like it matters a lot. I mean, it just feels very supplementary. First things first, whenever we talk about like a movie with like big budget special effects and stuff, CGI here looks great. The claws on Wolverine now look, I think, the best they've ever looked because of how they don't focus on the claws so much. Because I can understand, like in the first X-Men movies, you really kind of had to show off his claws, show just how powerful he was. But then later on in the next movies, like I think they focused on them a bit too much that you could tell they weren't really real. But here, the fact that it's just kind of like a part of him, and the audience isn't like in awe of his claws as much anymore. Like they just make it feel very natural, and because of that, I think they look more real. But the cool thing about the Wolverine is that there isn't that much CGI in it. I mean, not until the later parts of the movie, but for the most part, it's like lots of real fighting. I mean, of course, there's green screen backgrounds and stuff, but the fighting itself, it's very, very. It feels very real. It feels very raw. You have ninjas and samurai sword fighting, stuff like that. Some people complain that the sudden burst of CGI in the end feels kind of jarring. I personally don't think so. I feel like they set it up well enough that when it came, it wasn't really that surprising or anything. Like I kind of saw it coming anyway. But it's great to see a movie with just Wolverine as like the main mutant. So like most of the fighting is really like hand to hand, knives and stuff. And I think that's really the kind of fighting that works the best with Wolverine because you get to see his skill, and he is great at this. Like Hugh Jackman is great at fighting and stuff, and all the fight choreography is very, very well done. It's always very intense. Now, this movie is mostly set in Japan, and Japan looks fantastic. Like, Japan is just so scenic, especially for, a modern movie like this. There's lots of neon lights and stuff, and Japan just really lends itself well to a movie. And it is great that they kind of do stay in Japan, like, the entire time, because, I don't know, you really do just get to take in the culture, but they don't really, like, shove it in your face. There's just something so elegant and colorful about Japanese traditional like houses and costumes and stuff. Like the production design here is just great. But what I love about that is that it makes this huge contrast to the character of Logan because he's always wearing like a leather jacket and stuff, and he feels so different, but he seems to fit so well, especially with the whole comparison of him being like a Ronin. Now, to me, the X-Men movies have never really been movies about the aesthetic look of it. I mean, like, the first three X-Men movies had this kind of brushed metal feel, this very silver. Then X-Men First Class got, really colorful and stuff. But here, this is like the first time really that when I watched an X-Men movie, I noticed that, oh, okay, that shot looks really nice. Like, the cinematography here looks great because they do certain things with like coloring and lighting that just makes it look really cool. It makes it feel very Japanese, really. Another thing that sets Wolverine apart from the other movies is that it's actually much slower paced than the other movies because you're only really focusing on one character here in his journey, and I love how they really kind of made this more contemplative. Like, it really is about the character of Wolverine now, unlike X-Men Origins Wolverine, which wasn't really about his character. It was just about explosions and stuff. But here, the slower pace, while some people might not like it, I really do dig it because I feel like it makes things feel heavier for Logan. Like, there are lots of quiet moments here that I really, really, appreciate because there's time for you to think about Logan and where he's going, on his path as a mutant. And a lot of the success of this movie, I think, really is thanks to James Mangold, the director, who surprisingly directs action scenes really well. Like, looking at his filmography, I wouldn't really think he could direct a superhero movie that well. But the thing is, the Wolverine isn't really a straight up superhero movie. The great thing about the action scenes that James Mangold directs here is that he uses environments really, really well. Like, he kind of, I think, takes a cue from some martial arts films and definitely some Japanese action films. When you have ninjas in a movie, you just have to have them bouncing off walls and stuff. Some semi-parkour stuff, and a guy with a bow and arrow jumping across rooftops, and like he just really uses the environment really well. And some of it is a bit shaky, but it's not that distracting because you can tell that the stunt people doing these stunts are actually doing real flips and stuff. But on the other side, James Mangold also really knows how to direct character moments very well. Like, he really knows when to focus on Wolverine's character even in the midst of all the action. Like, there's a certain point, I swear, where the only thing you'll be thinking about is you being concerned about Wolverine's claws and hoping that they're fine. And that's never happened before because he was always kind of super powerful in the earlier movies, but here he's kind of a bit more vulnerable, especially since he doesn't have his healing factor. But my two favorite scenes in this movie that I think James Mangold directs extremely well are the first scene and the mid-credit scene. Like, they're book-ended. This movie's book-ended by two fantastic scenes. The first scene takes place in like Japan, World War II. I think it's fantastic. Like, there's almost no dialogue said, and it's just so great. And then the mid-credit scene is probably my favorite like credit scene from a lot of the Marvel movies. However, on to the things I kind of had a problem with this movie. For one, I do think the plot is fine. Like, I'm actually surprised that it's kind of complex. Like, there's stuff about the Yakuza and then a bunch of mutants, stuff like that. But like I said, this movie really does kind of feel very supplementary. Like, it's kind of a risk setting this movie after The Last Stand because they really do try to connect it to The Last Stand, but I really wish they did it a bit more because sometimes it just feels like main story, main story, main story, and then, oh, by the way, The Last Stand, and then main story, just feels very disconnected. So ultimately, the plot doesn't really feel like it does anything for the character of Logan, honestly. It really just kind of feels like a supplementary chapter in the story. I'm also kind of concerned about some of the acting in this movie. Like, I can understand that it's an international cast, and they kind of have to speak their lines in English. Tao Okamoto and Rila Fukushima are obviously much more comfortable in Japanese. Some of their English lines just kind of feel a bit strange to me. Like, it really does kind of feel like they're focusing so much on their dialogue that they kind of forget the other aspects of their acting. Svetlana Kodchenkova, like, she really does kind of just play her character very cliche. She's this character, Dr. Green, who obviously has some sort of hidden agenda, and it's just she's not a very memorable villain. Like, I think she's supposed to be the main villain, and that really is my biggest problem with the Wolverine is that a lot of these characters, aside from Logan, they're not memorable at all. Like, sometimes I got confused, like, who is who. Maybe it's just because of the Japanese names, and I'm not used to Japanese names. But really, by the end of this movie, it doesn't really feel like any of these other characters really matter. Like, it's really about Logan, but I would have liked to see good supporting characters. But in the end, I think the Wolverine is an okay movie. Like, it's not, the Wolverine story I think that fans like were dying to see. But for the most part, it's better than X Men Origins Wolverine. It's also notable, I forgot to mention that this movie actually has blood in it now. Like, whenever Wolverine stabs someone, like, there's blood. So I guess that's good. But anyway, as supplementary as this movie feels like, I really do think it's a good way to, precede X-Men Days of Future Past because, they're re-establishing Wolverine as the main character of this franchise. just in time for Days of Future Past. Anyway, that is my review of the Wolverine. Have you guys seen it? What did you think about it? Whether you loved it or you hated it, whether you agree with me or not, please leave me a comment. Let's have a conversation.